Hi, I'm Nicole Stott. I'm a retired NASA astronaut, aquanaut, and artist, and I'm here today to answer your questions about art and space. Question one. Okay, we have two questions that came in that are pretty similar, so I'm going to combine them. They're from Pilot Blue and Anonymous, and they are: how did she get the brush wet? How did she get the pigment to stay still? I need to know the physics. And what would happen if you tried to paint in space? Which I did, so we know that you can do it. So I painted with watercolors in space. And the thing about watercolors is you have to dip your brush into the water. And to do that, instead of, dipping your brush into a cup of water, because we don't have cups of water in microgravity, I would squirt out a ball of floating water and dip the brush into that. And then I just remember looking at it like, wow, that's really cool. I've got this floating ball of water on the end of this paintbrush. And then you had to slowly, kind of carefully take it down to where the paints are. Right before I got the water to the paint, it's like the water wanted to move onto the paint itself. And then I mushed it around and got a colored ball of water and pulled that off. And when I say pulled it off, I really mean that, because it was like this deformed ball of colored water came off of the paints, and then it ended up as another floating ball of colored water on the end of the brush. Everything is different when everything floats. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's more difficult, it's just different. And so I had to learn that if I actually touched the brush to the paper, the whole blob of colored water would go into the paper. So I had to figure out, how far do I pull that tip of that brush away to just be able to drag the colored water along it. So yes, you can do it. That's painting in space. Question two. So a question from Redacted: is a dead rover on Mars already a type of human art? I think even a live rover on Mars would be a type of human art. I think when we engineer things, we're creatively thinking, first of all, about how to solve the problem that we're working on, right? How do you get a rover to even work on Mars? How do you do the science of it? All of those kinds of technical things. But I think as we're creating that solution, we're also looking at, how do all these parts come together? And as humans, I think we want our work to be beautiful. And I would argue that every rover on Mars is beautiful. Every spacecraft we have is beautiful. It becomes even more beautiful when it's in the place it was meant to work. I mean, look at those rovers on Mars, and you see the glint of the metal or the colors of the solar panels against the backdrop of this, this other terrestrial type place, and it even becomes more beautiful. So I'd say yes, it's art. Question three. We have a question from Grenku. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. That is: how do you explain to people that art is a need and it improves the world? Well, I think as human beings, we're looking for beauty around us. We're looking to experience awe and wonder in different ways. And art is like, I don't know, it's just another expression of ourselves. And we're able to creatively present our ideas and our thoughts in ways that we might not be able to do just with the ones and zeros or with the technical aspects of things. That opportunity to use art with people has evolved for me even to something that I think is even more powerful, is the ability to work with kids all over the world, creating things like really cool art spacesuits. To do that, we formed an organization called the Space for Art Foundation, and we really believe that our mission is to unite a planetary community of children through the awe and wonder of space exploration and the healing power of art. And we have seen how the inspiration of space, getting kids in these places that you hope is the worst thing they're ever going through in their life, and watching how they're inspired and how they can create something of their own, bring it together and with other kids' art from around the world, and be thinking about their future in a very positive way, whether they ever want to travel on a spaceship or not. And I really believe that art, just like it's been a part of human spaceflight since humans first started going to space, I think art is going to continue to be a very important part, and perhaps even more important as we venture further off of Earth, as we go onto Mars. I mean, think about it. Every place we've gone in space, on a space station, suborbital, to the moon so far as humans, we see Earth out the window as Earth. All those colors glowing against the blackness of space. You start heading out to Mars, very quickly on that 6 to 9 month, 35 million mile journey, Earth is not going to look like Earth out the window anymore. And we as humans need to be able to take our humanity with us to be able to create in those places to stay healthy, not just physically, but mentally, psychologically as well. And art and music, I know, are going to be a very important part of that. And I like to think about it like that's the way we put the human in human spaceflight. Question 4. All right, we have a question from Kitty Rocket, and that is, are there any I can barely ever say that word, aesthetic considerations in NASA space hardware design? I don't know how you can look at the International Space Station. It's this football field sized spaceship that's orbiting our planet 16 times a day. It's been doing so for 25 years now. And you look at it, and it just looks like this masterpiece in space. It's got these ginormous solar arrays that have kind of these golden and even blue glints on them, depending on where they are, with respect to the light in the sky. And they are gorgeous. It is a beautiful spacecraft. Now, did the engineers say we are going to make gorgeous, solar panels for the space station? I don't think necessarily, but I have to imagine when they were laying that out on the drawing board, they knew those colors were going to come together. They knew it was going to look beautiful in space. And I can tell you, inside of the spaceship, there's a lot of thought into how the human will feel in that space. And it may not look like the most beautiful piece of art inside of there, but when you put humans in that place and you allow them to have their own personal touch on it, it becomes a very beautiful space to live in. Question 5. All right, we have a question from Bad Ate Everything. Can you spray paint in space? Wow, I never thought about that. Obviously, cans pressurized for use here on Earth would probably explode or be dangerous in a vacuum. But could you make a can spray paint for use in space, using less or a different propellant, or would it evaporate too quickly to be controllable? Well, when I think about this, I'm thinking about, could we spray paint in a microgravity environment inside of a space station, perhaps? And I think you absolutely could. When we operate in an environment like that, we have to be really, really careful about the materials that we put into that place. So I know a lot of the chemicals that are in spray paint can sometimes be, they can have a strong smell. They might have something that, if it's in a confined environment, you'd really need to kind of air that space out. And on the space station, we can't just open the window to air things out. So we'd have to be really particular about the kind of materials, the kind of chemicals that were used in that paint. So what I think about, and kind of in comparison to what it would be like if you were to push the nozzle on a spray can, is how we're trained to use a fire extinguisher on the space station. So imagine you have just a regular fire extinguisher and you're just floating in the middle of your module, and you were to pull the trigger on that and all this stuff comes out to go fight the fire. It's going to push that way. And I'm telling you, Newton was right. You are going to go in the opposite direction. And I think the same thing would be true for, pushing on the nozzle of a spray paint can. If you're not holding on to something, I think you're going to get pushed backwards as well, which would be kind of fun, though maybe a little bit messy getting paint everywhere. Question 6. Is it true that there's an art museum on the moon? Yes, it's true. There's a very tiny little work of art that was left on one of the landers. There's also, though, a little sculptural piece that was placed on the moon. And that was during the Apollo days, during the Apollo missions. But there have been other missions to the moon since there, not with humans, but with landers. There has been electronic art sent up on these missions as well. And so I think more and more there's this consideration of when we as humans venture back to these places, and even when we're not on the spacecraft, we want to be thinking creatively and putting our artistic works in those places as well. Question 7. Which astronauts are artists? There's a lot of astronauts that are artists. In fact, I've kind of made it a mission in life to discover what art that all astronauts do. And I think I could safely say that at least 90%, that's probably even low, 90% of my astronaut colleagues have some kind of artistic outlet, creative thing that they do. Many play musical instruments, and we've had a lot of astronauts play musical instruments in space. There's jam sessions going on the space station all of the time. And I'll tell you to, go on the interweb and look for bagpipes in space. You will find astronaut Kjell Lindgren playing bagpipes on the space station, which is a little bit, I think you have to love your crewmate to let them play bagpipes on the space station. But most astronauts that I know have some artistic thing going on. People like Alan Bean, he was the Apollo 12 astronaut, fourth man to walk on the moon. And when he retired from NASA, he went full-time as an artist, painting the scenes that he had experienced and that his colleagues had experienced on and around the moon. And my friend Karen Nyberg quilted on the space station. She's an amazing textile artist. Al Warden, when he came back to Earth, he wrote a whole book of poetry to tell the story of his spaceflight experience. And it just goes on and on. I think it's just what we as humans want to do. All right, Nicole Stott here. Thanks for watching. I hope you learned something about this beautiful intersection between space and art, and that by accepting our role as crewmates and not passengers here on Spaceship Earth, we absolutely have the power to create a future for all life on Earth that's as beautiful as it looks from space.